Welcome, first and foremost, to our donor software survey results and open forum. As you may know, I'm Alicia Wells, the Chief Operating Officer here at the Community Foundation, and we're really excited to have you here today to talk about some of the results from our donor software survey that we conducted this past spring. Just looking at the names, I know that many of you participated in that survey. We thank you so much for your time and your input, because this information is really helpful, not only to us, but also to you, and that's why we wanted to share it today. Through this opportunity. One of the things that I want to note before we dive into the information from the survey itself is that we didn't have hundreds of responses, but what we did see was a really nice cross-section of our charitable community. So we have small organizations, mid-sized organizations, and large organizations represented in the data. So what you're seeing in some way, will encompass kind of where you are as an organization, which is great. And one of the reasons why, we think these software programs are so important is because they're really transformational tools to help your organization. Whether you have a program in place and you love it, whether you have a program and you think you might be outgrowing it, or whether you're still keeping track of your donors on paper and pen, there's opportunities for you to be able to use these software programs to increase your organizational efficiency and then ultimately fundraise more successfully because you have a great tool to work with. So with that, I think we're going to dive into the results. So does everybody see my screen? Okay. So the first question in the survey was, what software program does your charity use to manage its donor information? And so you can see overwhelmingly the response was other, and right behind that was Excel and Access. Other encompasses a lot of different things. And so I did a quick dive to see, what were some of the other programs listed there. And some of them, I'll rattle off just a few, were GiftWorks, Salesforce. We had one respondent say that they had a custom program designed by a volunteer. And then there were a few industry-specific options like PetLink and Bravo Art Solutions. So that's one of the reasons why the other categories stood out among some of the other options along the left-hand column. We too at the Community Foundation use an industry-specific program called Community Akoya. So if we were participating in the survey ourselves, we would also fall into that category. So depending on what your situation is at your charity, sometimes a more well-known, broader national product might be a good fit for you. Other times there may be an industry-specific option that would allow you to have more capability, not only with the donor tracking or accounting or whatever other components you might be currently be using online, but also some other element. And so I suspect that's why some of those industry-specific options are available. The satisfaction, because he's satisfied, is ruling the day there, as far as how people feel about what they currently have. And then this is what we were just focusing on, was the contributions, individual and corporate, that each charity receives annually. So moving on, you'll see that the next question we had was, if you currently use a donor management software program, is it integrated with your accounting software? And predominantly the answer was no. So most people, if they're using something to track their donor information, they're also then going to have to enter those gifts into some type of other program that they may have. And there are certainly, pros and cons to that, depending upon, if you like your donor management software, if it has that capability, what type of accounting software you can use, and whether or not integration is even an option. But the danger lies sometimes in double entry, because then you're doing, twice the work. So if you have a program that you like, there's an opportunity for integration, that may be something you want to look at in the future, because it will help to save time and improve your efficiency overall. In addition to just accounting software, there may also be other integration opportunities depending on what type of donor management software you're using. So if you have something where you have to track volunteers, or client programs, or point of sale, or anything like that, whenever you're exploring options or you're looking at what you might currently have, those are other factors to consider too, because being able to consolidate all of that information in a single program could be really helpful. So the next slide shows how many contacts does your charity have in its database? And so this is an interesting question because I think too, sometimes it can depend on, how you interpret contacts. We were looking at this survey mostly within the lens of donor software. So you're looking at donor prospects. And so if you have a marketing database, really anybody in there could be considered a potential donor if they're not already donors within. But depending on what your organization is, what program you use, and what services you provide, you might have other subgroupings within your overall database as well. So one of the important things to consider when you're looking at the program that you have, or you may be looking at a new program, is coding capabilities. Can you do list segmentation, and how you can use that data for different applications depending on how you record them in the system. Just a few minutes ago, Betsy and I were having a conversation about some mailings and some targeting we wanted to do, and how important our database was in creating those lists for us so that we could do that segmentation and put certain people on a certain list or exclude them from another based upon what our overall objective was for that solicitation. So that's another tool that you want to look at your donor management software, see if you have it, make sure you're using it, and then really, once you have it in place, be consistent about how you're recording your entries, because that can be a really important tool. Depending on the number of contacts you have too, can sometimes lead you to a program. I know, if I were managing something in Excel, 100, 200, that may be fine. But as your contact database grows, that's an opportunity for you to move to a program that can manage the volume much more easily. Trying to manage that, tens of thousands of contacts in an Excel schedule is just too difficult. And that's why some of these programs begin to be developed. Another thing to keep in mind too, depending on, the software program you have and how the billing is structured, some of them charge you based upon the number of contacts you have in your database. So what works for a while may not work for you over the long term. And so what you don't want to do is have something that would prohibit growth, because the number of contacts you have can be directly associated with, again, your fundraising success, your fundraising potential, the prospects that you have in your system. So if you have a lot of quality contacts and you want to move to the next level, you don't want your software program costs to skyrocket because you're ready for that growth, but the program is going to hold you back. This last chart I have here is, does your charity have online giving? Overwhelmingly, yes. And there's no surprise there. Online giving has become more predominant in recent years. It's hard to find an organization that doesn't have online giving at this point in some form of another. But the things to keep in mind if you have an online giving platform, certainly, again, comes to cost. Is there a benefit to your organization having this mechanism? If most of your donors are traditional check writing donors and you only get a few online gifts every year, it may not be worth it for you to continue to have to incur expenses, for online giving whenever it's just not catering to your demographic or your donor base. Conversely, it might work really well for you. There are some organizations that, routinely receive contributions. Maybe it's through memorials. Maybe it's a favorite organization that people love to remember their loved ones with. And so they'll see an influx of online gifts, in relationship with someone's desire to support that organization as a memorial. So that might make sense. So again, all of these tools that we have, whether it be a donor management system, online giving platform, accounting software, all of them kind of need ongoing assessment to make sure that they're really serving your organization's needs. Because as you grow, it might continue to be a good fit, or it may be time to make a change. Just a piggyback question that followed this one. I didn't make a chart for it because I just wanted to call it out in the presentation itself. But only 11% of the respondents who have online giving platforms have them integrated into their accounting software. So, a charity would, in order to respond to that, obviously they'd have to have accounting software, and then they'd also have the online giving capabilities, but many of them aren't linked. And that's not uncommon. I can tell you here at the Community Foundation, our online giving platform isn't linked to our accounting software either. And again, there's pros and cons to that. a lot of it has to do with volume. For us, it just is just as manageable for us to get our, monthly activity, enter those gifts in the system, and then proceed accordingly. Whereas if you're a charity where you're getting thousands of gifts, a lot of them are coming online, and everything is just ongoing on an ongoing basis. It makes a lot of sense for you to want to integrate those systems together, because again, then you don't have the dual entry happening. So does anybody have any questions about the survey itself? I thought all the findings were pretty interesting, but all really straightforward. And I was most surprised by the fact that we had a lot of the organizations all using different platforms. And so with that, we're going to move now to the next part of this presentation, which are real testimonials from other charity representatives in the community. All 5 of these individuals participated in the survey and said they would be interested in kind of sharing their experience with the donor software programs that they use, because they like them and they're working for them. And with that, then I'm going to turn things over to Jeff Gontelier from Blueprints, who's going to walk you through his slides. Jeff, I'm just going to control these on my end, so just let me know when you want to change.
All right, we'll go quick. I don't have a whole lot to say, but thank you, Alicia. Thanks everybody for giving me your attention here for the next 5 minutes. We use a software called Bloomerang, and I saw from that first slide you had, Alicia, we're the only one using it. So I pulled some screen grabs because it's kind of difficult to talk about donor software just kind of in the abstract. So I just put together like 9 or 10 screenshots from the database itself. So you can, if you want to, if you're taking notes, it's just bloomerang.co. And once you get there, they have a lot of videos, demo videos. There's pricing, and obviously a way to connect with them to work with you individually. But what you're seeing now, this is the dashboard. We've been using this system for about 5 years now. We transitioned over from Raiser's Edge. I know a number of local organizations are using that software. We found Raiser's Edge to be way more than we really needed. For those of you who don't know what Blueprints is, we're a large organization. We work with low-income individuals and families, and there are times that constituency is not the most popular for people to make donations to. We are primarily government, state, local, and federally funded for our programs, and we do great work for sure. And it's less of I always like to say it's less of a charity. We're a charitable organization, but we're not a charity. With the exception of the emergency rent utility assistance program, the insane amount of money that is going out due to the pandemic, we have very few of our dollars that actually go directly to direct client assistance. Our services are more geared toward people getting on that future story path and realizing self-sufficiency and self-reliance. But nonetheless, we do have a need for a donor database. So this is the dashboard. The Bloomerang has a really simple and clean design. It's very user-friendly and intuitive. It'll give you right from the dashboard. You can customize this dashboard as well, but it will give you the donor retention, the amount raised in a particular week. If we have a campaign going on, it'll talk about the status of the campaign. And along the right side, first-time donor calls, the sustainability scorecard, all those kinds of things. So if you want to move to the next slide, Alicia. So if you click the constituent, all the icons along the left side, they're pretty straightforward. You click the constituents, and from here you can search any constituent that's in the database. So prior to our staff creating a constituent, they'll search and make sure that person hasn't donated to the organization before. And again, it has the same layout as the dashboard. This kind of just overlays over the dashboard. Next slide. So once you click on new constituent, you can either create an organization, say, for instance, in our purpose, when we have our golf outing or our clay shoot, those fundraising events, organizations often sponsor those events. So we'll put those organizations in here. We can add an individual donor as necessary. Next slide. So this is just the demographics. So once you click on new individual, you put in all their information. We try to get as much information as we can, as most donor databases do, because you want to know as much about the individual or organization as possible so that you can cultivate that relationship. And the next slide is just the bottom half of that demographic information. What I like about this is the communication preferences. So for primarily the people who reach out to our donors would be our CEO, myself, or another member of the executive team. So we try to check this prior to those contacts to make sure that we're communicating with people the way they prefer to be communicated with. Next slide. Bloomerang also has a number of reports that are kind of boilerplate reports, but you can also create reports in the system. So, for example, you can pull up donor lists from the past. If we have, I know we have a golf outing list, we have a clay shoot list, so we know the individuals who have participated in our events in the past, and we can make sure that we can, pull up those lists and start our communication prior to those events coming up. Next slide. The system also has the ability to create thank you letters for us. So anytime we have an event or there's been a donation, we can generate the thank you letter right from the system, and it'll export right into a Word document, and we can do mail merges from there and get those thank yous out. Next slide. And then the settings, what I like about Bloomerang is it is highly customizable for an online software or an online system. We are able to create fields, get rid of fields, hide fields, create different appeals, different events in the system, and kind of it's individual to the login too. So we have no limits on the number of people who can log into this. We do have a limited number of people who do, but our pricing is not tied to the number of logins. It's tied to the number of constituents that we have in the system. Next slide. There's a billing tab, so we can see all the invoices right from here. We can check our payment methods. That box that says reduce your bill, that's if we're thinking about, if we would happen to be thinking about changing systems, we can reach out to them and they can try to keep our business. You can see there that our license count right now is we have 654 constituents in this system, and our limit is 1,000. So if we put 346 more people in, our pricing will go up. And I think the next slide is the last slide. Oops, I didn't even include it. You probably want to know the cost. We pay $1,188 a year for up to 1,000 constituents. And as I said before, we used Razor's Edge before, and it was quite a bit more expensive. And not to knock the system, because I think that's probably up there in the top 5 in terms of sophistication and organizations who use it. But we never, because our donations are not, we don't rely on individual donations to a great degree. It was just too much system for what we needed. And every time we turned over our planning staff, we'd have to send them off to training. And as I said, it wasn't as user-friendly as we found Bloomerang to be. So
Jeff, what was your conversion like from Razor's Edge to Bloomerang?
It was like night and day. We had a lot of trouble with Razor's Edge, so much so that we would put a lot of donor information in, and our staff were not adept at getting that information out, so they would rely on backup Excel spreadsheets. So I took a look at that and said, well, why are we paying what we were for a very sophisticated system when we really weren't using it? We were just putting information in, and they just weren't able to draw that information out. When we moved to Bloomerang, because I don't want to say it's oversimplified, it certainly meets our needs. In fact, when I was talking to our primary data enterer for Bloomerang, she said, please don't change. Please don't change. So our conversion was really easy. It was simple. And the folks at Bloomerang, they worked with my IT department to pull all the information out of Raiser's Edge and put it right into Bloomerang. And it was, at least from where I sat, it was seamless.
That's nice to hear, because that doesn't always go as smoothly as it could. Does anybody have any questions for Jeff about Bloomerang?
Do actually, Jeff, because Blueprints is such a multifaceted organization, and you do a lot of different things. And forgive me if I missed this in your presentation, but do you separate out like donations to Head Start as opposed to maybe like a housing supports program? And do you do that in Bloomerang?
Yeah, we do, and that's when you on the constituent screen, instead if you search a constituent, you pull them up if we're going to enter in, say somebody gave $500 to our aging program, for example, in Greene County. When we put that donation in, we have to tie it to, I forget the terminology, it's not an event, but it's a appeal. We have to charge it to an appeal or track it as an appeal. So that would be all of our programs. Because, as you all know, if somebody is giving you a restricted donation, we have to use it for that purpose. So we track that very closely, and Bloomerang does that. We create your own categories or use the categories that are in there. And we put, based on what the donor designation is, we put that up.
Did you catch that, Jeff?
I can't hear you at all.
That's about, that was Joanne Nazer asking about generating reports, about the ease and putting them together.
It's really easy. I'm sorry, Joanne, I didn't hear your question, but yeah, it's, as Joanne said, when we mark everything as, every donation by appeal, we can run those reports by appeal. We can run it like a global report. And it is, if your question is it easy? It is easy. They have a kind of a report generator. It might even be called that, where you just put in the parameters that you want, and it'll pull that up, and you can export it right to Excel.
I see we have a couple more questions, but in the interest of kind of getting to our other 4 presenters, we're going to move on, but then we might circle back for questions again at the end. So moving from a former Raiser's Edge user to, I think, a current Raiser's Edge user, Melissa, would you like to tell us about your experience in Morro Valley Hospital with the program?
Sure. Thank you for having me. And I'm happy to share a little bit about Raiser's Edge. Most of you may have, even on this call, be using Raiser's Edge. So this might be just some reminders. And I sort of just created my simple presentation based on some pros that I thought of, and then some cons. And it's a really great bridge between Jeff's presentation to my presentation, because then I am going to touch a little bit on Bloomerang as well. But as many of you know, Raiser's Edge has a long-standing history. It's been around since 1983. It's always been, as I sit in a room full of fundraisers, people in development, and we talk about our database, it's sort of, when you say you have Raiser's Edge, you're kind of like, people look at you and think, oh, wow, your organization has Raiser's Edge. That's so great. And that's been the majority of my career. Sort of most organizations at a certain size strive to have Raiser's Edge. And based on what Jeff has shared, I think there's definitely a shift more towards Bloomerang as people learn more about it. And that's sort of the words, when you hear Bloomerang, everybody's eyes open up and they start to think about, wait, what is Bloomerang? Should I know about it? What do I need to know about it? The record management is really detailed, allows for a lot of information in all the fields, similar to what Jeff showed you. It's the same thing with Raiser's Edge. There's an easy search if everything is set up correctly. And the first thing that I learned in development is, as a professional fundraiser, working with folks who specialize in the database management, I learned the philosophy that always have things entered with the end in mind. Meaning, anytime I ask for anything to happen in Raiser's Edge, I always think about what I want to do with that information a week from now, 6 months from now, 2 years from now? How do I want to get it out? So we make sure that we set it up correctly, whether that be a code, an attribute, business linked to an individual. And so Razor's Edge does allow for all of those details. And I also really like that in Razor's Edge, you can create an alias. So if something is called Monongahela Valley Hospital, we can put that in. But if we would also call it Mon Valley Hospital, we can put that in, and we can even put in MVH. So anybody who goes to search for it will have an easy time. Otherwise, if you don't put that alias in, it could be very difficult to find it. So we always try to, when we set up a record, we always try to think about anything that we might call that. I also like in Razor's Edge, the relationship feature, like I mentioned before, that when we have a business, we can then create a record for the CEO, the person who works in accounting, our contact, our rep, and they link. So when I pull up the business account, the business record, I can scroll down about halfway, and right there's a link to anybody who might be somehow related to that business. Same thing with individuals. We can say John Smith, and we can have Ryan Smith on his record as his brother or his wife or his sister or his friend or his coworker, so that we can see relationships very easily. And I appreciate that, and I use that a lot. The donor codes, attributes, appeals, everything. I don't think we can get away from all of that as fundraisers, but I sometimes find it cumbersome with Razor's Edge, but I would find it just as cumbersome with Bloomerang or another software. I am not an expert with database management. We are fortunate that we are large enough here that we have some folks who help us with that, at least part-time. We have some folks who are the experts and they help us with that. But again, anytime I'm entering something, I have to tell her how to enter it specifically for how we're going to use that individual or look at it in the future or want to include them in reports or queries. We can assign fundraisers, primary and secondary. So when I open up Razor's Edge, I see the first thing I see is my 130 current prospects, and under all of them, it probably says primary or secondary fundraiser. So if you have a larger organization, it helps to not step on people's toes. If Alicia is working with one potential donor, I would see that right away when I open up the record. The one really nice thing that we were excited about with Razor's Edge is NXT, which was, I think, Razor's Edge's way of updating and trying to get with the new times. We actually were asked to pilot NXT, so we have had it for a very long time. But what didn't come with that was somebody holding our hand, helping us get through that. So we really had no idea. We prided ourselves on, oh yeah, we have NXT before other people, but we weren't using it. And that sort of transitions a little bit into the cons, and I'll get there in just a couple minutes. But overall, we feel like the customer service with Razor's Edge is lacking, and we wish we could have an easier time calling or getting online help or having somebody who checks in on a regular basis to help us with simple questions. And that was definitely the one thing with NXT is we had this great new platform, and we're all busy. And so to carve out that extra time to learn something new is stressful for us. And so we didn't get there quite as early as we could have. NXT has been really nice. We ended up hiring, we spent one summer, I think 2019. We spent that entire summer focusing on our database, and we had an outside consultant come in, and she worked with us about 3 to 4 hours a week and really helped us clean up our database. But then also myself and our executive director, she spent a lot of time with us working on NXT. It's nice because I have the app on my phone. I can look at records whenever I need to. The best part is if I leave a meeting and Mr. Smith said, hey, Melissa, will you call me in 4 weeks? I'll know what I want to do at that point, and I'll be able to write you a check. Then I just get in my car and I pull up Mr. Smith's record, and right away I throw that note in and I put a reminder on. So it's in there and Razor's Edge is going to remind me to do that. NXT, using that dashboard looks more like Bloomerang's dashboard home screen, but I don't think it's quite there yet. And I hardly ever use the old Razor's Edge database. So moving on to sort of some of the cons, because you can tell I do have some. I think the sign-on for Blackbaud Razor's Edge is always challenging because there's so many different layers of Blackbaud that I sometimes have to sign in 2 times into 2 different platforms with 2 different usernames and passwords. And so that was one of the questions I asked about Bloomerang, was how simple or difficult is it to get signed in? We also have a supervisor account for Blackbaud Razor's Edge, and we have 2 professionals here that both act as the supervisor, and that password needs updated quite often. It requires you to update that. And I feel like our 2 professionals are always communicating with each other. Hey, I updated the password, but we want to keep that password protected. So how do we share this information back and forth with 2 people trying to log in as the supervisor at different times? The cost for Razor's Edge is a lot. And it really is, for a nonprofit in the fundraising world, I mean, your database is probably, you know, it's what you have to have. And so the cost is, you know, you're going to spend money on that, but what we're finding is that we are spending a lot on Razor's Edge. And then for every add-on, we find that there's a price. And again, it might be worth the price, but it's also not just the cost, but the time invested to learn how to use something new. And we've always felt that we don't get that support from Razor's Edge. And so we were really excited about the event module, and we started to pay for that when it came out, but we found we couldn't figure it out on our own. And we had a lot of questions, and it was just easier for us to continue to use something like Eventbrite than to spend the time to learn how to use something in Razor's Edge. And so we stopped paying for it. We also stopped paying 2 years ago when we signed a new contract. We actually also stopped paying for the unlimited customer support, because again, every time we did try to get it, we weren't hearing back right away. We weren't getting the answers right away, and it just became cumbersome. So if you are committed and you can carve out time to learning the new programs and learning something new, the cost is definitely worth it. But we have to be realistic to how much can we do on a daily basis. Talked a little bit about support. And I just think overall, the system looks and feels a little outdated to me. We're looking at some of the other systems. I'm a very visual person. So just looking at some of the other dashboards and home screens and tabs, it just seems a little bit more updated and easier to use. Queries and reports with Razor's Edge, I am never confident that I am pulling the right information. Again, that's not what the hospital hired me for. The hospital hired me to go out and talk with donors and then ask, you know, we have other people here who can help us with that. But if I'm here and somebody's on vacation or I need a last minute report, I'm walking into my CEO's office, I'm never quite confident that it's correct. Again, because there's so many appeals and codes and attributes, and just making sure the time frame is right. And hopefully with Bloomerang, it's maybe a little bit better. I know you talked a little bit about that, Jeff, but I'm hoping that either if we do go ahead and switch to Bloomerang at some point, that I'll either be able to invest the time to learn and be confident, or it's a little bit easier with Bloomerang. So whenever the Community Foundation team asked if I would be willing to speak today, I said, absolutely, but here's the catch. We are leaning towards possibly switching to Bloomerang. So it was a little bit difficult for me to speak strictly on Razor's Edge because I knew we were in this process of switching to Bloomerang. This September, we'll have 1 year left on our Razor's Edge contract. And so I will share with you that the time is now for us to talk with Bloomerang and to make that switch, because their conversion process can take up to 6 months, and you don't want any time lost between our Razor's Edge contract runs out in September of 2022, but we don't have Bloomerang quite set up. And so if you want to sign a 1-year contract with Razor's Edge, you know that that's much more expensive than signing a 3-year contract with Razor's Edge. So really the time is now for us to be thinking about making the switch to Bloomerang and putting that in the following year's fiscal budget. So we'd be looking at putting that new cost and any conversion cost into the 2023 fiscal year budget, and really making a decision now, but jumping on it early in 2022. And then we'd sort of have a backup system that sometimes we could look at something in Razor's Edge, but also look at it in Bloomerang and make sure that the numbers are coming up the same, the records are coming up the same, so that we've made sure that the conversion happens correctly. There's a lot of excitement about Bloomerang. It's catching on. People are really interested in it. It hasn't been around quite as long as Razor's Edge, but it does have a history, and people are successful with it. We're finding that Bloomerang will probably cost us at least half as much as we're paying for Razor's Edge each year after the conversion and the setup fees, which are fair. I think the setup and conversion fees are, a couple $1,000s. I want to say less than like $6,000 to get all set up.
Melissa,
yeah.
Thanks so much. I'm sorry, I hate to cut you off right there, but I want to make sure we can move on to some of our other topics. Thanks for a very thorough overview on Razor's Edge.
Sure.
I know that I've used it too in the past. It's a powerful tool, but it can be very cumbersome and overwhelming for people who aren't really well-versed in data management. So thank you so much. I'm going to segue over to Kelly Proudfit from the Washington Area Humane Society to tell us a little bit about their program. Kelly?
I've been here since 2016 as the director. When I started, a kind of funny story, the first thing I asked was, can I see our donor list? And I was handed a jump drive, and it was an Excel spreadsheet. So they were putting donations into an Excel spreadsheet and into QuickBooks. It was kind of a mixed mosh. So I knew that was going to have to be one of the first things I tackled. And so kind of how we went about it is we reviewed 4 different softwares back in 2017. And QuickBooks was probably one of the lead ones at the time, more affordable. So one of the main reasons we wanted easy mail merge outputs, better reporting, and we needed integration donation forms to put into our website because we were doing everything through PayPal. So that wasn't really ideal. The cost in choosing software, like I said, we researched 4 products and we ended on Donor Perfect. I felt like it was not as involved as Razor's Edge and some of the others, more affordable, and it was kind of a big step for us at the time. We're still in it today. 4 years later, we have 9,000 constituents in our system, and we're charged roughly $4,000 a year for that. And that does not include the transaction fees. You do have to work with their processor, but the fees are very reasonable and comparable. Things we love about Donor Perfect, it's very easy to use. And if we have time, we could share my screen, I could show you, but the homepage interface is super easy. I had never actually used a donor-based system when I took this job. So I was able to learn it very quickly. I didn't have to have any formal training, good interface. The customer service is excellent. It's always available. There's a little chat icon in the corner you can click on at any time, in business hours, and it's a real person. So if I'm trying to figure out a report and I just can't get it to work, you can do customized report templates. They will work with you very quickly on the spot. They'll even log into your system and just create the template and do it for you if you're really in a rush. So their customer support is excellent. Comprehensive reporting, pretty much any report you could want exists. They have a really good general donor retention report that shows the history of your retention, number of gifts, attrition rates, all that type of stuff. They also have forms you can build. They have custom template forms that you can integrate into your website, and you need no HTML coding experience. You can change the colors, the fonts. You can import your logo. And you just take, once you build your form, you take that little snippet of code and you just copy and paste it on the web page on your website. So nobody's leaving your website per se. They're still in your framework doing their donations online. And we do a considerable amount of donations online, so we use that quite a bit. They have survey forms, they have event sponsorship forms. So I've been very happy with that. Another thing, they've got a nice in-memory donation. We get a ton of in-memory donations here. So there's a great database. You can search by name. You can do bulk letters to multiple people with in-memory donations. And we use that, I mean, endlessly all month long. And there's an easy ability to send bulk letters. So we send a letter to every single donor. We have about, I think we're up to about 6,000 gifts a year. So that's a lot of letters. So we do them in bulk, and you can do bulk emails, bulk. We've got 20 different letter templates that go out, and it's all integrated into Donor Perfect. And it's, once again, you don't need to know a lot about software to do this interfacing. What else? You can track pledges for capital campaigns. They've got a really good tracking process for that. They've got great in-memory donation management and communications for those type of donations, monthly donations, and then customized response emails. So overall, we've been really happy. I did look at Raiser's Edge recently, did a lot of interfacing with their team to see if it was time for us to kind of move on to something new. And I felt like it was just so over-engineered for our needs. It's just myself and another development person here. And I think Raiser's Edge seemed to be more targeted towards large groups where you want to assign tasks, have a lot of oversight of who's doing what, goal sharing, and they do have a lot of great integrated analytics, but it was too much for who we are right now. So, and I did hear that their customer service is lacking. Things we wish were better with Donor Perfect. There's no integrated analytics. They just launched that, and it's an extra fee, and I haven't had time to investigate that, but it is offered. They lack any crowd raising team fundraising abilities. I think Raiser's Edge kind of touts that, but when I dug deeper with them, it's just you're one-offing to a third party, and the integration is not seamless. So we use OneCause to handle our virtual team fundraising and online auctions, and it doesn't integrate into Donor Perfect, but really we're only using it a few times a year, so the data entry isn't that time consuming for staff. It wasn't worth the investment to go to a Raiser's Edge that says they can do that. And then, you know, a big thing, we take all our donations that go into Donor Perfect and we integrate them into QuickBooks. And there's no easy plug and play. I mean, you can do it, but the data still isn't just seamlessly going over. So my accountant just basically spits out reports from QuickBooks every month, or from Donor Perfect every month, and manually puts it into QuickBooks. And honestly, it's not that time consuming. So once again, it'd be nice to have that integration, but it's not a must have. So I would highly recommend Donor Perfect for smaller teams who are trying to get off of QuickBooks, Excel, you know, ones that are using kind of really basic ways of tracking donors, want more reporting, more ability to do forms, automated letters, emails. I think it's a really nice step to the next level, and it's not overwhelming at all. The pricing's decent and the customer service is excellent.
Thanks, Kelly. That's a really great overview on Donor Perfect. We did have one question for you in the chat, which is, sure, does Donor Perfect have an events page that allows you to sell tickets for events? They
do. So we set up a ticket form, because you can set up any kind of form you want. You can customize your user templates. So we have on our website right now, if you click on our farm to table, you can see an example of that. There's a sponsorship form, there's a ticket form. The thing we don't use is the seating chart, like, you know, give us a list of people who are going to be at your table 8 or 10. That's not, I don't think that's very well done. But just to sell tickets, yeah, and it pushes straight into your bank account through their payment processor. So you don't have to do any of that. And then it automatically sets up the gift as a constituent in Donor Perfect. So it's all automated and it works really, really well. And the transaction fees were, I think, lower than PayPal. you know, all these things are going to have a fee, but they were reasonable.
Great. Thanks so much. Well, in the interest of time, we're going to move on to Sharice Sandrock from the Food Rock. Thanks, Kelly. Sharice, why don't you tell us a little bit about your program?
All right, thanks. So we here at Food Helpers, which we were formerly and still Greater Washington County Food Bank, we use Keela. We've had it for about 2 years. I would say it's on the non-complex end. It's very user-friendly. I've been using it for the last year, and I didn't need any sort of formal training. They do have customer service that's pretty readily available. We use it for the contacts for the donors, but also we use it for our volunteer management. So we can track all the volunteers, and we're able to send out communications to either our donors or our volunteers. We have roughly 8,500 contacts, and ours is $1,500 a year for 10,000 contacts. One of the things that we've really used it for this past year is we started doing virtual food drives because of COVID, people were not wanting to do food drives in person, and it was a really nice feature that we could set up. So if someone wanted to have a food drive, it creates a QR code and we can put it on a flyer for them, and then anyone that donates can scan the QR code and it goes right to their food drive. So that was really nice. It was a nice feature for us to use, and we will continue to use that a lot, I believe. We process through PayPal. We do use QuickBooks, and then our QuickBooks imports into Keela. So it just imports right in there. And sometimes there's a little bit of manual, like if someone has a middle initial or not a middle initial, like that kind of stuff. But it's very easy. There's any report that you could think of, you can create. And so we really like it here. It is probably on the less complex side, but it works for us. So the thing that I would change about it is I wish we had a text feature, and I know some donor platforms do have being able to text people. It doesn't offer that, but that would be helpful again for us more on the volunteer side. I'll try to keep that short, but it looks a lot like the Blueprints one.
And I think what's interesting for you is the QR code capabilities for that. That's really a unique thing for your organization. So I'm glad that you were able to get that bell and whistle.
Grace, what was the name of your software?
Keela, Keela.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right, and then Tracy, would you bring us home?
I am Tracy with the Bradford House. I'm going to piggyback a lot of what has already been said. Just so everyone knows, the Bradford House, it's the Bradford House Historical Museum. I'm the only full-time employee, so envious of you who have departments and have other people who are going to work with you. So prior to I used Little Greenlight. Prior to going to Little Greenlight, I was an Excel spreadsheet user. I've been with the company for 10 years, but I've been using Little Greenlight for the past 3. I'm going to give a shout out to WCCF because I transferred from Excel to actually a software program on the last round of capacity building grants. I kind of upgraded all my software, all my hardware within the museum, and that's how I got to Little Greenlight. I reached out to some people and got a suggestion to use Little Greenlight. I don't have pictures either to show you, just talking points, but it has the support and everything that we've been seeing is very common. I want to say that the fee for my use, it's only $421 a year. That's with a 10% discount. I pay it with an ACH. There are no setup fees, no cancellation fees, no contracts. The tier that I'm in is the lowest tier, which means I can have up to 2,500 records, and it'll just increase. The fee will increase, as everyone else has said. And to give you an idea, right now I have 755 records, so it could be some time before I get to that number. Let's see. as far as strengths, because we're all trying to talk about strengths and weaknesses, I think the system is very easy to navigate. I have my summer intern sitting with me today, and one of the things that I've tasked her with for the summer is every time I get a donation, anytime I get a letter sent back to me with the wrong address, anytime somebody stops in and gives a gift, I have her going in and updating the system for me. I have to say it's very easy to work with. She has never been exposed to donor software before, so it's her first stab at it, and really has had no problems in doing it. The other thing that I'm having her do is export to reports for me. Again, every report you can imagine comes out. You just pick on what you want. I've had her run it based on, you can put things in under different categories. So I've had her run it based on, who's given money this year, who's given money at the year end, who's given money as a membership, who has done memorials. There's all those different capabilities. Let's see, at year end, I always run reports. The system, I was trying to read everybody's questions on the side as we are going through these. And I found it interesting because there is a lot of capability within Little Greenlight that honestly, I just don't use because I'm the only person in doing everything else. I did look up and got some answers, though. Little Greenlight does allow for online donations. There's lots of query options. It can be used for events. Again, I do have events at the museum, but I've never considered actually using my donor software for it. So I'm actually learning from you guys. Weaknesses, I was trying to come up with weaknesses for the donor software. It's interesting because I think it's perfect for an organization my size. I think the weakness comes on me, the user, and the fact that there's so many things that it can do that I don't use. Some of the stuff is it does, when my intern would enter a donation, it can spit out a thank you letter. We've never done that, but her and I are talking about, learning that capability and doing that throughout the summer. And then of course I'll continue after she's gone. It does have timelines, acknowledgements, goals, letters. It does track volunteer hours. I keep track of volunteer hours, but I'm old school and I have a big calendar on the wall and I keep track of my volunteers that way. But that functionality is definitely there. So I can answer any questions that you would have, but honestly, it's the right system for our size. And like I said, the things that I find are weaknesses are simply because I'm not using it.
Thanks, Tracy. I think you hit on an important point right there, is that, again, we're looking at organizations of all different sizes, different staffing numbers, different needs. And so one program that works really well for a large organization doesn't necessarily translate to a smaller organization who really needs just that basic functionality of moving from Excel to the next level. So I think all of our presenters, you guys did an awesome job providing an overview of what you're using and why it works for you and some considerations moving forward. Tracy, you gave a beautiful segue into the next point I want to touch upon in our last minute here, is that we have a capacity building grant cycle open right now through August 1st to submit applications. And one of the reasons why we tried to time this open forum when we did is to use this as an opportunity for you to consider if a donor software program or other computer program, accounting program, website, any of those types of things might be a good fit for your organization in delivering and creating a request for that capacity building cycle. So we have Karen Spar, our allocations and programs manager, on the call. I know you guys know Karen. If you have questions or as you start to think about what you want to submit, please reach out to her and have that conversation so that we can ensure that you're putting together an application that best serves your needs and that really meets the needs of this cycle in particular. And again, thanks everyone today for participating in this open forum. I think we could have talked for another hour or two about software programs and the pros and cons and all of those things. If you have any questions regarding anything you heard today, feel free to reach out to us. I'm sure our presenters as well would be happy to answer any questions that you might have about the particular programs they use at their organization. So we'd be happy to connect everyone. And thanks. If you have anything else that you need from the Community Foundation, feel free to reach out or give us an email at any time. And we hope everybody has a great day today. Bye.